The Galactic Accord had stood for 47 years. It was a promise between 7 species, a promise of peace, a promise of cooperation. Humanity was the youngest member of this great alliance. They had joined with hope in their hearts and dreams of a better future among the stars. Admiral Daniel Cooper stood on the bridge of the carrier Resolute. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the fleet for 30 years. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like what was happening on the screens in front of him. The Cathari warships had come without warning. They appeared in Earth's orbit like ghosts. Their dark hulls blocked out the light of the sun. Their weapons glowed with terrible energy. And then they began to fire. The plasma batteries cut through the civilian transports like they were made of paper, ships carrying families, children, workers returning home from the outer colonies. They had no weapons. They had no shields strong enough to stop the attack. They had nothing but hope that the treaty would protect them. That hope died in the first minute. Lieutenant Lisa Morgan stood at her station. Her hands shook as she read the reports coming in. Her voice was barely steady when she spoke. "Admiral, they are targeting the refugee convoys. No military vessels, just civilians." Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. It was not fear. It was something deeper, something darker. He had trusted the treaty. He had believed in the Galactic Accord. He had thought that the elder races, with all their wisdom and experience, would honor their word. He had been a fool. The death toll climbed past 1 million, then 2 million. The numbers kept rising. Each number was a person, a mother, a father, a child, a friend, real people with real lives that had been ended in fire and pain. Commander Nathan Price rushed onto the bridge. His face was pale. His uniform was wrinkled. He had clearly run all the way from the communications center. "Admiral, we just received a transmission from the Dominion Council." Daniel turned to face him. "What do they want?" Nathan swallowed hard. He looked like a man who had just learned that everything he believed was a lie. "They say that humanity must surrender all ships. We must dismantle our colonies. We must submit to population management." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. They all understood what population management meant. It was a clean word for a dirty thing. It meant that the elder races had decided humanity should no longer exist. "On what grounds?" Daniel asked. His voice was calm, too calm. Nathan handed him a data pad. "There was a clause in the treaty, a secret clause that we were never shown. It says that if any member species is deemed a threat to galactic stability, the Council can authorize corrective action." Corrective action. Daniel repeated the words slowly. They tasted like poison in his mouth. "They mean genocide." Lisa Morgan turned from her station. There were tears in her eyes, but her jaw was set with anger. "Sir, the Cathari are still firing. They are moving toward the inner colonies now. Mars is calling for help. So is Luna Station." Daniel looked at the tactical display. The Cathari fleet was massive. Hundreds of warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity possessed. At least anything humanity had shown them. The Council had always been suspicious of humanity. Humans advanced too fast. They asked too many questions. They did not accept the way things had always been done. The elder races had lived for thousands of years. They had seen young species rise and fall. They knew how to handle threats, or so they thought. For 40 years, humanity had followed the rules. They had limited their weapons to Class 3 armaments, just as the treaty required. They had stayed within their designated borders. They had bowed their heads and said yes when the Council gave orders. But humanity had also learned. They had watched the elder races carefully. They had studied their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses, and they had prepared for the day when the treaty would no longer protect them. That day had come. Daniel walked to the center of the bridge. He stood straight and tall. The fear and shock that had gripped his crew began to fade. They looked at their admiral and saw something in his eyes. It was not despair. It was determination. "Get me a secure line to High Command," he said. "Every ship, every station, every colony, use the Blackwell Protocol." Nathan's eyes widened. The Blackwell Protocol was a myth, a rumor, something whispered about in dark corners but never confirmed. "Sir, that protocol is classified above my clearance." "It was classified," Daniel said. "As of now, it is active." The communications officer, a young man named Tyler Ross, began working at his console. His fingers flew across the controls. "Sir, I am establishing the link now, using the secondary channels." The Cathari had technology that could intercept any known form of communication. They had been monitoring humanity for decades. They knew every frequency, every code, every encryption method that humans used. At least they knew the ones humanity had let them see. The Blackwell Protocol used a different system entirely. It was based on quantum entanglement, a technology that the Council had declared impossible for a species as young as humanity. But Dr. Amy Chen and her team at the Blackwell Research Institute had made the impossible possible 15 years ago. They had just never told anyone. Daniel looked at the screens showing the destruction around Earth. Millions dead. Millions more about to die. The elder races had decided that humanity was too dangerous to live. They had broken their own treaty to ensure humanity's destruction. They expected panic. They expected desperate pleas for mercy. They expected humanity to beg for their lives. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Connection established, Admiral," Tyler reported. "All commands are standing by." Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment. 40 years of preparation, 40 years of secrets, 40 years of playing the obedient child while building something the galaxy had never seen. "All commands, this is Admiral Cooper. The Galactic Accord is broken. The Elder, the galaxy expected humanity to scream. They expected chaos and fear. They expected desperate calls for help that would never come. Instead, something strange happened. Humanity went silent." The Cathari commanders watched their communication scanners with growing confusion. The human channels had gone dark. No military orders, no emergency broadcasts, no cries of panic from the civilian population. Just silence. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a bunker that was not supposed to exist, Secretary of Defense Kevin Marshall sat at the head of a long table. Around him were the most powerful people on Earth, military leaders from every nation, scientists who had spent their lives working on secrets, politicians who understood that the old rules no longer applied. "The Council has given us 72 hours to surrender," Kevin said. His voice was steady. He was a man who had prepared for this day his entire career. "They expect us to use that time begging for mercy." General Laura Kim leaned forward. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for being the smartest person in any room. "What they do not know is that we have been preparing for this moment for 40 years. A holographic display flickered to life in the center of the table. It showed a map of human space. But this map was different from any that the Council had ever seen. It showed ships in places where no ships were supposed to be. It showed bases hidden in asteroid fields and moons. It showed a military force that was 10 times larger than anything the elder races believed humanity possessed. Dr. Amy Chen stood up and walked to the display. She was a woman in her 60s with gray streaks in her black hair. She had dedicated her life to one purpose, making sure humanity would survive. 40 years ago, when we signed the treaty, we knew something was wrong, she explained. The elder races were too eager to limit our technology. They were too interested in watching our every move. We realized that they did not want peace with us. They wanted to control us until they decided we were no longer useful. She touched the display and it changed. It now showed the inside of a factory that looked like it made simple farming equipment. But beneath the surface, hidden from any scanner, were production lines building weapons that could tear through Cathari shields like they were made of air. We built 2 civilizations, Amy continued. One that we showed them, and one that we kept hidden. Kevin nodded. The question now is how we use what we have built. On the other side of human space, Captain Ryan Brooks stood in the hangar bay of Outpost 7. This station was listed in official records as an abandoned mining facility. It had been abandoned for show. In truth, it was one of 12 hidden military bases scattered across the outer rim. His pilots gathered around him. There were 40 of them, men and women who had trained for years on ships that officially did not exist. They had flown missions in the dead of night, learning how to fight in ways the Cathari could never predict. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan stood at his side. She was young, barely 30, but she had the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Captain, the attack on Earth. My family was on one of those transports. Ryan put a hand on her shoulder. I know, and I am sorry. But right now, we have a job to do. We can mourn later. First, we make them pay. He turned to face all of his pilots. For 40 years, the elder races have watched us. They have monitored our factories, inspected our shipyards, and read our communications. They saw exactly what we wanted them to see. A young species struggling to keep up with the rest of the galaxy. He walked to a large door at the back of the hangar. He pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open. Behind it was a sight that made several pilots gasp. Ships. Row after row of ships. They were sleek and black, with designs that looked nothing like standard human vessels. They had no visible weapons, no obvious engines. They looked almost alive. These are Spectre-class fighters, Ryan said. They can outrun anything the Cathari have, they can hide from any sensor, and they carry weapons that the Council said were impossible to build. One of the pilots, a man named Jake Collins, stepped forward. How did we keep this secret for so long? Ryan smiled. It was not a happy smile. Because we knew they would never believe it. The elder races think they are smarter than us. They think we are too young, too primitive to hide anything from them. That belief is going to cost them everything. Back in the mountain bunker, Kevin Marshall received a report from Admiral Daniel Cooper. The first phase of Contingency Omega was complete. All hidden assets were now active and in position. The Cathari had no idea what was coming. Dr. Amy Chen pulled up another display. This one showed the Cathari Second Fleet, currently moving toward Earth for the final assault. They had over 300 warships. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of their species. They think this is over, Amy said. They think they have won. Kevin stood up and looked around the room. These were the people who would decide the fate of humanity. Scientists, soldiers, leaders, all of them had sacrificed so much to reach this moment. Send the signal, he said. All forces prepare to engage. We hit them hard and we hit them fast. No mercy, no hesitation. General Laura Kim nodded. And after we beat them, the other races will come for us. The Velthari, the Norax, all of them. They will not stop until we are destroyed. Admiral Vorketh stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Burning Dawn. He was old for a Cathari, nearly 300 years. He had fought in 12 wars. He had conquered 6 species. He had never lost a battle. This would be the easiest victory of his career. The human fleet was small and weak. His scouts had counted their ships. Less than 50 warships to defend their entire home world. They were using outdated technology, restricted weapons, engines that could barely reach half the speed of his own vessels. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the human fleet is holding position near their 3rd planet. They are not attempting to retreat. Vorketh made a sound that was the Cathari version of laughter. Of course they are not retreating. They have nowhere to go. All paths out of this system are blocked by our forces. He walked to the main viewing screen. Earth hung in the distance, a blue and green jewel against the black of space. It was beautiful, he had to admit. It would be a shame to burn it. But the Council had decided. Humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too human. "Signal all ships," Vorketh commanded. "Begin the final approach. We will crush their fleet first, then deal with the planet." 300 warships moved forward as one. The Burning Dawn led the formation, its massive cannons already charging. Behind it came cruisers and destroyers and support vessels. It was the largest fleet the Cathari had fielded in over 1,000 years. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Daniel Cooper watched them come. His face showed nothing. His hands were steady on the arms of his command chair. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. "Admiral," Commander Megan Torres reported from the tactical station, "Cathari fleet will be in weapons range in 4 minutes." Daniel nodded. "Is everyone in position?" Megan checked her screens. "All units report ready. The Achilles Protocol can be executed on your command." The Cathari thought they understood human military doctrine. They had studied humanity for decades. They knew how human admirals thought, how they reacted, how they fought. They had planned for every strategy in the human playbook, but the playbook they had studied was fake. "Admiral Vorketh," a Cathari sensor officer suddenly called out, "I am detecting something strange. Multiple energy signatures appearing throughout the system." Vorketh turned to look at the sensor display. "What kind of signatures?" "I am not certain. They match no known profile." The officer's voice grew concerned. "Admiral, the signatures are everywhere. Behind us, above us, below us. They are surrounding the fleet." For the first time in his long life, Vorketh felt uncertain. "That is impossible. Our sensors would have detected any approaching vessels." "These vessels did not approach, Admiral. They were already here, hiding." The space around the Cathari fleet began to shimmer. Ships appeared from nothing. Black ships with strange designs. Ships that had been invisible to every sensor the Cathari possessed. Daniel Cooper's voice came over the communication channel. It was calm, almost friendly. "Admiral Vorketh, this is the human fleet, the real human fleet. I wanted to give you a chance to surrender before we begin." Vorketh stared at the tactical display in shock. He could not believe what he was seeing. Over 200 human warships had appeared from nowhere. They were positioned perfectly. His fleet was surrounded on all sides. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Your cloaking technology is primitive. Our sensors should have detected you." "Your sensors can only detect technology you understand," Daniel replied. "You spent 40 years watching us, monitoring us, restricting us. You thought you knew everything about us. You were wrong." Vorketh's hands curled into fists. "You are still outnumbered. We have 300 ships. You have 200. And our weapons are far superior to yours." "Are they?" On the Resolute, Daniel nodded to his weapons officer. "Fire!" The human ships opened fire together. Beams of energy shot out from weapons that should not exist. They were not plasma cannons or laser batteries. They were something new, something that cut through Cathari shields like they were not even there. The Cathari ship Hammer of Conquest exploded in the first second. Then, the Storm of Vengeance. Then the Pride of the Empire. Ship after ship died in brilliant flashes of light. Vorketh gripped his command chair as the Burning Dawn shook from a near hit. "Return fire! All ships, return fire!" The Cathari weapons blazed. Plasma bolts and missile swarms filled the space around them. They hit the human ships and did nothing. "Admiral, our weapons are not penetrating their shields," his weapons officer reported. "They have some kind of defense system we have never seen before." The human ships moved through the Cathari formation like wolves among sheep. They were faster, more agile, more deadly than anything Vorketh had ever faced. His fleet, which had seemed so powerful minutes ago, was being torn apart. Captain Ryan Brooks flew his Spectre through the heart of the battle. His fighter danced between plasma bolts and missiles. He targeted a Cathari cruiser and fired. The ship's shields flickered and died. A second shot pierced its reactor core. "That is for Earth," he said quietly as the cruiser exploded. Lieutenant Katie Sullivan flew at his wing. Her voice was cold over the communication channel. "My family was on the transport Liberty's Hope. 1,000 people. They were going to my cousin's wedding on Mars." She fired on another Cathari vessel. It burst into flames. "There were children on that ship, children who never hurt anyone." Another shot, another explosion. "They did not even give them a chance to surrender." The battle lasted 6 hours, 6 hours of fire and death and destruction. When it finally ended, the Cathari Second Fleet existed only in pieces of twisted metal floating in the darkness. Admiral Vorketh's flagship was one of the last to fall. He stood on his bridge as the burning dawn burned around him. Human boarding parties had already taken the lower decks. There was nowhere to run. A human Marine captain named Steve Parker appeared at the bridge entrance. His weapon was raised but not firing. "Admiral Vorketh, you are now a prisoner of the Human Alliance." Vorketh looked at the human with something close to respect. "You hid all of this for 40 years. How?" Steve smiled. "Because you never asked. You were so certain you knew everything about us. You never imagined we could be anything other than what you expected." Across human space, the news of the victory spread. The Cathari Second Fleet destroyed. Not a single human ship lost. It was a victory that should have been impossible. The Velthari had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were the oldest of the elder races. They had built the first interstellar civilization. They had written the treaties that governed all other species. They had never known fear, until the human ships appeared in their sky. High Counselor Selvoth stood at the window of his chamber, looking up at the vessels that now orbited his homeworld. They had arrived without warning. The Velthari long-range sensors, the most advanced in the galaxy, had not detected them until they were already in orbit. This should not have been possible. 300 light-years separated the Velthari homeworld from the nearest human colony. Even with the fastest ships known to exist, such a journey would take months, but the human fleet had crossed that distance in a single jump. They had technology that the Velthari did not understand. "How many ships?" Selvoth asked his military advisor. "Over 100 warships, High Counselor. All of them are the new class we observed destroying the Cathari fleet." The advisor's voice trembled. "Our orbital platforms are ancient. They were built to fight enemies from an age long past. They would not survive an hour against these weapons." Selvoth closed his eyes. He was over 2,000 years old. He had guided the Velthari through countless challenges. He had always found a way to maintain their power, their position, their control over the younger races. But he had never faced anything like this. A communication alert sounded. A human face appeared on the screen. It was Admiral Daniel Cooper, the same human who had destroyed the Cathari fleet. His expression was unreadable. "High Counselor Selvoth," Daniel said, "I hope you will forgive the unexpected visit. We thought it was time we had a conversation." Selvoth straightened his robes. Even now, he would not show weakness. "You have violated our space. You have threatened our world. What do you want?" "We want to talk. Nothing more." Daniel paused. "We could have attacked. Our weapons could reduce your cities to dust in minutes. But we did not come here to destroy. We came to renegotiate." On the surface of the Velthari homeworld, shuttles descended from the human fleet. They carried diplomats and soldiers, not an invasion force. Just enough to make a point. Dr. Chris Martinez led the diplomatic team. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He had spent his career studying the elder races, learning their cultures, understanding their fears. General Laura Kim commanded the military escort. Her soldiers surrounded the diplomatic team as they walked through the ancient streets of the Velthari capital. The Velthari citizens watched from their windows. They had never seen humans in person before. They looked so small, so fragile. But the Velthari had seen what those fragile creatures could do. The meeting took place in the Hall of Ages, where the Velthari had made decisions for 10,000 years. The walls were covered with the history of their civilization. Great victories, fallen enemies, treaties signed and empires built. Selvoth sat at the head of a long table. Around him were the senior members of the Velthari High Council. They had ruled the galaxy for longer than humanity had existed as a species. Now they waited to hear what these young humans wanted. Chris Martinez stood before them. He did not sit. He wanted to be at eye level with the Velthari leaders. "For 40 years we followed your rules," he began. "We limited our weapons. We stayed within our borders. We accepted your inspections and your restrictions. We did everything you asked. And in return, you built secret weapons, secret ships, secret armies." Selvoth's voice was cold. "You lied to the entire galaxy." "We prepared to survive," Chris corrected, "because we knew from the very beginning that you were planning to destroy us." Selvoth said nothing. He could not deny it. Chris continued. "The clause in the treaty, the one that authorized corrective action, the one you never showed us, we knew about it. We found it in your own archives, hidden behind encryption that took us 15 years to break." Laura Kim stepped forward. "You wrote that clause specifically for us, not for any other species, just humanity, because you were afraid of what we might become." "You advanced too quickly," Selvoth said. "In just a few hundred years you went from primitive machines to interstellar travel. No species in history has grown so fast. You are unpredictable, dangerous. And so you decided to eliminate the threat before it could grow." Chris nodded. "We understand. We might have done the same thing in your position. Fear makes people do terrible things." He reached into his bag and pulled out a data tablet. "But we are not here to punish you. We are here to offer you something better." The tablet displayed a document, a new treaty. Chris explained its terms as the Velthari Council read along. The Galactic Accord would be dissolved. In its place would be a new agreement. All species would have equal standing. No more elder races with special privileges. No more young species with restrictions. Every civilization would be free to develop at its own pace. "You would let us live?" one of the council members asked. "After what we did?" Laura answered before Chris could. 2 million humans died because of the treaty you wrote. 2 million innocent people burned alive by Cathari weapons that you authorized. Her voice was hard. "Do not mistake our mercy for forgiveness. We remember what you did. We will always remember." "But we are not you," Chris added gently. "We do not solve our problems by killing everyone who frightens us. We believe there is a better way." Selvoth studied the human diplomats for a long moment. He had lived for 2,000 years. He had seen countless species come and go. He had watched civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore. But he had never seen anything like humanity. "Why?" he finally asked. "You have the power to destroy us, to conquer the entire galaxy. Why offer peace?" Chris smiled. It was a sad smile, full of wisdom that seemed strange on such a young face. "Because we have seen what happens to civilizations that rule through fear. They become what they were afraid of. They turn into monsters." He looked around the ancient hall at the histories carved into the walls. "You have ruled for 10,000 years, and in all that time you never stopped being afraid of the next threat. Afraid of the species that might one day challenge you. That fear led you to create the clause that authorized our destruction." He turned back to Selvoth. "We do not want to live like that. We want something better. For us, and for everyone in the galaxy." The Velthari Council debated for 3 days. Some wanted to fight, Some wanted to run, but in the end, they all understood the truth. The old order was over. Humanity had changed everything. On the fourth day, Selvoth signed the new treaty. News of the agreement spread across the galaxy. The Cathari, facing the complete destruction of their remaining military, signed within a week. The Norax signed 3 days later. One by one, the elder races accepted the new order. Not because they agreed with it, not because they wanted peace, but because they had no choice. Humanity had shown them that the galaxy had changed. The young species they had tried to destroy was now the most powerful force in known space, and instead of using that power for revenge, they had chosen something different. They had chosen to build something new. Admiral Daniel Cooper watched the signing ceremony from the bridge of the Resolute. His fleet still orbited the Veltari homeworld, a reminder of what humanity could do if the new treaty was broken. 5 years had passed since the treaty was broken. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Old enemies had become allies, ancient powers had learned to share, and humanity, the species that had once been treated as children, now stood as equals among the stars. The Galactic Assembly met on Unity Station, a massive structure built in the empty space between star systems. Human engineers had designed it. Velthari artists had decorated it. Cathari warriors guarded it. It was a symbol of everything the new order represented. Ambassador Nicole Davis stood at the central podium. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a voice that commanded attention. She had spent her life working for this moment, a moment when the galaxy could finally move forward together. 5 years ago, we nearly destroyed each other, she began. The old order tried to kill us. They thought we were too dangerous to live. They thought they could erase us from history and no one would remember. She looked around the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species watched her. Some had been enemies. Some had been oppressors. Now they were colleagues. They were wrong. We did not die. We did not surrender. We fought back and we won. But our victory was not just about weapons and ships. It was about proving that there was a better way. On Earth, the memorials stood in every city. 2 million names carved in stone and metal and light. 2 million people who had died in the first hours of the war. Families gathered at these memorials on the anniversary, not to mourn, but to remember. Sarah Mitchell brought her daughter to the memorial in New Chicago. The little girl, only 7 years old, looked up at the endless rows of names. "Mommy, who are all these people?" Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "These are people who died so we could live. Your grandmother's name is here, and your uncle, and many others." "Were they brave?" Sarah nodded, her eyes wet with tears. "They were very brave. They did not have weapons. They could not fight back. But they never gave up hope. And because of them, we are here today." Admiral Daniel Cooper had retired to a small farm in Montana. He had seen enough of space, enough of war. He wanted to feel real dirt under his feet and watch real clouds in a real sky. But visitors still came. Historians and journalists, mostly. They wanted to understand how humanity had prepared for a betrayal that seemed impossible to predict. A young reporter named Beth Campbell sat across from him on his porch. She had traveled from halfway across the galaxy for this interview. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know the elder races would betray us?" Daniel rocked slowly in his chair. The evening sun cast long shadows across his fields. "We did not know for certain. But we knew something was wrong. The treaty they offered us was too good, too generous. They restricted our weapons but let us keep our scientists. They limited our expansion but let us build factories. It did not make sense." He paused, remembering those early days. "So we pretended to follow the rules. We built the ships they expected. We developed the weapons they approved. And in secret, we built something else. Something they could not see." Were you afraid it would never be needed? That you were preparing for nothing? Daniel smiled sadly. Every single day, I hoped we were wrong. I hoped the elder races were exactly what they claimed to be, wise protectors who wanted to help us grow. He shook his head. But we were not wrong, and when the time came, we were ready. Dr. Amy Chen continued her research at the Blackwell Institute. But the institute was no longer hidden. It was now one of the most famous scientific centers in the galaxy. Species from every corner of known space sent their brightest minds to learn from human scientists. She stood before a class of students, humans, Velthari, Kethari, and a dozen other species, all of them eager to learn. The elder races tried to hold us back because they were afraid, she told them. They had seen young species rise and become threats. They thought they could prevent that by keeping us weak. She smiled. What they did not understand is that humanity does not just survive. We adapt, we grow, and when someone pushes us down, we find a way to rise higher than before. A young Kethari student raised his hand. Professor Chen, my people tried to destroy yours. How can you teach us? How can you trust us? Amy walked over to the young student. He was barely 20 years old. He had been a child when the war happened. He had not chosen to attack humanity. Because you are not responsible for what your elders did, she said gently. And because we believe that the future can be different from the past. Your people made a terrible mistake. But you can choose to be better. The Kethari, once humanity's would-be executioners, had changed more than anyone expected. Their culture had always been built on strength and honor. They understood and respected what humanity had achieved. General Vortash, son of the defeated Admiral Vorketh, now commanded a joint human Kethari patrol fleet. He stood on the bridge of the Unity, a ship crewed by both species. His second in command was a human woman named Captain Jenny Walsh. She had lost 3 brothers in the war. She had every reason to hate the Kethari, but she did not. General, she reported, we are receiving a distress call from the Norax border. A civilian transport is under attack by pirates. Vortash turned to face her. How far? 3 hours at maximum speed. Then we go at maximum speed. He looked around his bridge. Human and Kethari officers working side by side. 5 years ago, they would have been trying to kill each other. Protect the innocent. That is what we do now. The Unity jumped to faster-than-light speed, rushing to save people who had once been enemies. Commander Nathan Price, now an admiral himself, taught at the newly established Interstellar Academy. Young officers from every species came to learn from him. They thought the treaty made us weak, he told his cadets one morning. They thought compliance meant surrender. What they failed to understand is that humanity plays the long game. He walked among the students, humans, Velthari, Kethari, Norax, and others, the future of the galaxy, sitting together in one room. We smile, we nod, we follow the rules, and all the while, we are preparing for the day those rules no longer apply. He paused. But that does not mean we want conflict. We prepare for war so that we can have peace. We build strength so that others will not test us. A human cadet raised her hand. Admiral, do you think there will be another war? Nathan considered the question carefully. I hope not. The new Galactic Assembly gives every species a voice. The new treaties protect the weak from the strong, but hope is not a strategy. We will continue to prepare. We will continue to watch. And if anyone threatens the peace we have built, we will be ready. On Unity Station, Ambassador Nicole Davis finished her speech. The assembly chamber was silent. Every representative understood the weight of this moment. The galaxy learned a valuable lesson 5 years ago, she said. Humanity is not just another species climbing the ladder of civilization. We are something new, something the universe has never seen before. She looked directly at the Velthari delegation, then the Kethari, then all the others. We can appear harmless while becoming dangerous. We can suffer in silence while building our strength. We can face extinction and choose not just survival, but victory. She paused. But we can also forgive. We can also build. We can also hope for something better. That is what makes us human. The treaty was signed. Representatives from every major species added their marks. It was not a perfect document. There would be disagreements and conflicts in the future. But it was a start. Outside the station, the stars burned bright. Billions of worlds, trillions of lives, an entire galaxy full of possibilities. Humanity had come to the stars as children. They had been tested by fire. They had emerged as equals. The treaty had been broken. Humanity had not gotten mad. They had turned the tables. And now, they would help build a future where such treaties would never need to be broken again. The end. Commander Nathan Price stood beside him. Do you think it will last? The peace. Daniel considered the question. I do not know. The elder races still fear us. That fear will not disappear overnight, but at least now we have a chance. He looked out at the stars. So many worlds. So many species. So much potential for both good and evil. We showed them that we could destroy them, Daniel said quietly. Now we have to show them that we can do something better. That is the harder task. But I think we are ready for it. The fleet began to move away from the Velthari homeworld. The war was over. The rebuilding was about to begin. The other races of the Dominion Council received the reports with shock and fear. They had authorized the attack on humanity. They had believed it would be easy. Now they understood their mistake. Ambassador Scott Patterson appeared before the council via holographic transmission. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fire. For 40 years you treated us as children. You restricted our growth. You monitored our progress. And when we became too successful, you decided to destroy us. He paused. We are not children anymore, and this is only the beginning. The transmission ended. The council chamber fell silent. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the human fleet was already preparing for the next phase. The Cathari had been defeated, but they were not the only enemy. The war had just begun. Kevin's eyes were cold. Then we will beat them too. One at a time until they understand that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not children to be managed. He paused and looked at the display showing Earth, his home, the birthplace of every human who had ever lived. Millions of people had died in the last few hours. Millions more were counting on him to save them. Send another message through the Blackwell channels, he said. Tell every human in the galaxy. The treaty is broken. We did not start this war, but we are going to finish it. The message went out at the speed of light, through channels that the elder races could not detect. It reached ships hiding in asteroid belts. It reached bases buried deep in frozen moons. It reached soldiers who had trained their whole lives for a fight they hoped would never come. And in every corner of human space, men and women prepared for battle. They checked their weapons. They powered up their ships. They said goodbye to loved ones, knowing they might not return. The Cathari thought they had cornered humanity. They thought the hunt was over. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Races have authorized our extermination. He paused. Execute Contingency Omega. It is time to show them who we really are. Across human space, the message spread through channels that could not be detected. Ships that looked like cargo haulers began to change. Hidden panels slid open. Weapons that were not supposed to exist powered up. Engines that defied the known laws of physics came online. The Cathari continued their attack on Earth. They did not notice the changes happening in the shadows. They did not see the ships gathering in the darkness between stars. They did not understand that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of their species. Admiral Daniel Cooper watched the tactical display and allowed himself a small smile. The treaty was broken. Humanity was not mad, they were ready.